Hey guys, it's Greg from East Coast Eyes, back with another episode of Theory Thursday. This week we'll be discussing applying patterns to different heads. Alright guys, so in this week's Theory Thursday, I'm going to be breaking down the theory of applying patterns from one head to another head. This is a problem that comes up pretty often and is a question that I get asked all the time. You have this pattern for this head that I really like, but I don't have that head. I have this other head. How can I string my pocket with that same pattern and apply it to this head? And so this can either be really difficult or really easily. And obviously there's a number of factors that come into play when you're applying a pattern from one head to another head. The first is obviously sidewall holes. Text message. So the first factor that comes into play is obviously sidewall holes. If one head has many sidewall holes, take for example this Nike Lakota, which has numerous sidewall holes all the way up and down the head. If you have another head that has an equal or similar number of sidewall holes, like the Evo 4, the Clutch, pretty much any modern head, the Rabel, you're going to be able to apply the pattern pretty much straight up the same most of the time. You can just take the pattern, skip the same holes for the most part. If it has all the holes that like a Clutch or Lakota, they have pretty much the same number of holes, you'll be able to apply the pattern pretty easily between the two heads. If you have a head that has a lot of sidewall holes and you're trying to apply that pattern to a head that has very few, you're going to have some difficulty, and we'll discuss this later. The second factor is face shape. So if you look at this Nike Lakota, it has a pretty narrow face shape with a pretty gradual flare, somewhere between an Evo 4 and a Clutch as far as face shape pinch goes. So if you look at this Clutch, it has a little bit more of a tight pinch to the throat and a little bit of a longer throat. So if you take a pattern from a Lakota to a Clutch, even though they both have a lot of sidewall holes, it's going to turn out a little bit different just because the shape of the flare up top and the shape of the throat and the length of the throat. Another thing you have to consider is if the head is X-spec or not. Obviously, patterns from NHFS heads, which do not have any limit in the throat, are not going to translate that well to X-spec heads, which are 3 inches to the throat and 6.5 up top. So you're going to have to compensate a little bit for that extra width and add a little more pocket to get the same depth and maybe pull it down a little tighter to get the same channel. So those are the two main factors, is stringing holes and face shape, that affect if you can translate a pattern from one head to another. So now let's cover taking a pattern from a head with few sidewall holes and putting it into a head with many sidewall holes. So I've got here is the Evo 2.0. It has very few sidewall holes, the same number as the Evo X, just 8 or 9 down the side with very large spaces. It's an older head, but it's still pretty popular. Here I've got a pocket that is mid-low with a nice channel. It's a great pocket. So if you want to take this pocket and translate it to a head like the Nike Lakota or the Brian Clutch or the Evo 4 or the Evo 3, it's going to be relatively easy because there's so many sidewall options that it's not going to be that hard to replicate this pocket in this head. So you can see that the face shapes are pretty similar, and obviously here we've got a Lakota pocket with a mid-low. It's a very similar pocket, and there's a ton of ways to achieve this pocket. Here I've got SIs all stacked up on each other. Because there's so many sidewall holes, you have that option, but you could pretty much apply the same pattern, which is SI, 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 1 SI, 2, 2, 1. And what you would have to do is basically line the two heads up on top of each other, look at them, and pretty much decide where you want the SIs and adjust the pattern and the width of the channel accordingly. So whereas for the 3 SIs up here, we did not have to skip any holes. Up here on the Lakota, since there's so many holes, you have to skip holes intermittently in those 3 SIs up at the top to apply this pattern to this head, so that the tension in the mesh and the pulling down of the mesh is the same as it was in this head. So now let's talk about going the other way, taking a pattern from a head with many holes and applying it to a head with few holes. So we'll just switch this scenario. I've got this Nike Lakota with a nice mid-low pocket that I like a lot, and I'd like to apply that pocket to the Evo 2.0. What we've got here is a pattern that has some SIs up at the top, skipping holes to pull it down tightly, and a lot of bunched SIs all at the bottom to bunch up the mesh and create that pocket. Well, obviously, with this Evo 2.0, that's not an option because we don't have enough mesh holes to do individual SIs to bunch the mesh up enough. So what we have to do in this pocket is take what we know about ones, twos, SIs, one SIs, two SIs, interlocks, one interlocks, two interlocks, triples, doubles, to create the same pocket using those tools. So in the Evo 2.0, you don't have any problem with the first three interlocks. You just pull them tightly down to the first three holes. But whereas in this head, we had the fourth mesh hole, which gets pulled tightly with an SI. Here, we've got a sidewall gap where we're not able to pull that fourth mesh hole tightly. So what we're going to have to do is do a 1 SI, incorporate that fifth sidewall hole. So we're going to pull that fourth down by also pulling the fifth down, and it's going to give us that same channel without using the fourth SI and substituting in a 1 SI for the fourth and fifth sidewall diamonds. And then instead of bunching SIs, it's very simple at the bottom. We're just going to do two consecutive twos. So I've got mesh hole, mesh hole, mesh hole, mesh hole, all bunched into this area. Same thing that 4 stacked SIs would do, but in this case I had to use twos. So what you want to do is, again, just look at the sidewalls side by side, analyze the sidewalls you have, and decide what tools, as far as usually it's 1 SIs and 2 SIs, you have to use to reach those other sidewall holes while maintaining the same pocket to transfer the pattern. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Theory Thursday. Leave your comments and ideas for new Theory Thursday episodes down in the description or down in the comment box. Make sure to like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't for daily streaming videos, and have a great day.